What is dictatorship? Have you ever been to Cincinnati, Ohio? You know, Cincinnati's nickname used to be the Paris of America, which I'm sure the actual Parisians were thrilled about. You should visit. I mean, if you like a sort of very white, but with a lot of black people, Midwestern, used to be industrial, didn't vote for Trump in a state that did vote for Trump kind of town. Oh, and Cincinnati has some good museums, great theaters, and wonderful music festivals. Oh, and Cincinnati was named after a dictator. It's probably the only major American city named after a dictator. For now. You know, until our current wannabe competent, batshit for brains, tin-plated, tariff-talking toddler-in-chief decides to rechristen a bunch of American cities as Donaldsvilles or Trumpsylvanias. Not many people, hell, I'm guessing just about nobody, besides some people who actually live in Cincinnati, and history nerds like myself. Not many know that every time you cheer for the home of the Bengals, you are chanting the name of an actual dictator. How did that happen? Well, I'll tell you. Back in the year 296 AUC, AUC, that stands for Ab Urbe Condita, which means the number of years since the founding of the Roman Republic. Because that's the way the Romans counted their years. Yeah, see, they never would have said whatever year BC, because BC just wasn't a thing for anybody back in those days. And I think it's important to remember that. History major. Anyway, back in the year 296 Ab Urbe Condita, the Romans were at war. Again. Another thing about the Romans, they were always at war. Always saying that they were under attack by some neighboring tribe or village that the Romans really just wanted to conquer so they could take their stuff. Sound familiar? Now, in those days, land and trade routes were normally the justification for conquest rather than, say, I don't know, oil. Where was I? Oh, yeah, 296 Ab Urbe Condita. The Roman Senate proclaimed the city was in danger from some tiny-ass village nearby, and that only military force could save the Republic. So they sent a small army to stomp on their neighbors. But the Roman general was an idiot, and his army got surrounded and besieged. But 5 of his soldiers did. They escaped the siege, and they made it back to Rome to tell the Senate what happened. So the Roman Senate did what the Roman Senate doed. They decided to appoint someone to a special job that they had invented years ago for emergency times, just like this. It's a position that controlled the army and the government without question. It's kind of like having an all-powerful king, but only for a short period of time. Temporary totalitarianism. Oh, and the rule was that during the emergency, whatever this person said was the law. And the Latin word for speaking with that kind of authority was dictate. So they called the job dictator. 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 Anyway, the Senate wanted a dictator to save the day. And somebody said, hey, I know just the guy. And they sent a couple of messengers to this farm on the edge of town where there was a retired senator. He was living there and he was working on his field. Will you be the dictator and save Rome? They asked him. And he's like, all right. So he gathers up a Roman army, marches out, and gets the army to surrender. And then he comes back to town. Boom. Done. The whole thing took less than 2 weeks. It wasn't really much of a battle anyway. I mean, and afterwards, he let the soldiers from the other side just go home. But that victory wasn't what made him famous. Oh, no, it was not. It's what he did next. With absolute dictatorial power in his hands, power he could have held on for a little longer. He could have held that power to make himself rich or get a lazy nephew or maybe a couple of idiot sons, get them some jobs or something. That dictator, named Lucius Quintius Cincinnatus disbanded his army, resigned from the job of dictator, went back to his farm. Now that is a sentence you do not hear often. Not the one about the farm, but resigned from the job of dictator. Oh, and years later, he died peacefully at the age of 89. Peacefully at 89. Most of us nowadays are not going to make it to 89. And respected. Man, was he respected. And not just then, but throughout history, he had total power in his hands and he handed it back. It's very undictator-like. Lucius Cincinnatus was like, this isn't about me and power. It's about doing a job to save my country. And that admirable act is why Cincinnati is named after him. On the other hand, in the year 710 ab urbe condita, when the Roman Republic was finally coming out of a very long and bloody civil war, Julius Caesar got himself declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, because, he could. Another thing about the traditional job of dictator was it had a set term, and when that term was over and you were no longer dictator, you could be called to account for any crimes you committed while you'd been in office. But, dictator for life, well. Unsurprisingly, Caesar didn't get a peaceful 89-year-old hero death. You probably know that. Caesar's death was more of a stabby dictator death. But after him, dictator took on a whole different meaning. And when people think dictatorship, nowadays, they think less Cincinnatus and more Caesar. Mainly when people think dictator, they picture a guy, because it's normally a guy, wearing sunglasses and a gaudy military uniform with way too many medals, standing behind a podium or up on a balcony, waving at a parade of tanks. There are some variations. Sometimes they wear robes. Sometimes they wear caftans. Sometimes they wear blue business suits with red ties and little flag pin. Different costumes. But if you have a leader waving at a parade of tanks, or who wants to wave at a parade of tanks, you might have yourself a dictator. At its essence, what modern dictatorship means, it's still right in the word. It's to rule by dictate. Dictator says it, it's law. Dictator orders it, it is acted upon. That person, arrest him. That person, deport her. That school, defund it. That news outlet, shut it down. That political party, outlaw it. That political opponent, silence him. Jail him. Kill him. All because the dictator says so. And he dictates it. And there is no one to overrule a dictator. Hey, we're supposed to have these 3 equal branches of government, right? Three equal branches. It was in civics class. 3 branches. Legislative, judicial, executive. Legislative to pass the laws, judicial to administer the laws, and executive to enforce the laws. 3 equal parts. But a wannabe dictator, they don't normally start off with taking over the executive branch. That way they can pick and choose which laws to enforce. They can harass their political opponents with accusations while turning a blind eye to the crimes and corruptions of their own allies. Second step for a wannabe dictator is to ignore the courts and judges. Just ignore any judge or jury that says the wannabe dictator is enforcing the laws unfairly. Just no. Ignore the judicial branch completely. Laws mean nothing to a wannabe dictator. Heck, they might even put a couple of those judges in jail for disagreeing with them. Who's going to stop them? Because they are above the law. Oh, and a lot of citizens will be okay with the whole no laws for the dictator thing, as long as that dictator uses the no laws for me power to give the people, his people, what they want. a vision of a nostalgic past in which they were empowered, and unending violence and oppression against those they have been trained to blame for the loss of that glorious past. Oh, but what about the other branch, you may be wondering? What about the other branch, the elected one, the legislature? Surely an elected parliament or Congress would stand up to the dictatorship. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Nazi Germany had elections. Yeah. See, Hitler came to power in Germany not by overthrowing the government, but because the Nazi Party had been elected to enough seats in their German Congress, they call it the Reichstag, that the head of their party could be legally appointed Chancellor of Germany. Chancellor is like Prime Minister. So, they had enough seats to decide who was going to be Chancellor, and the Chancellor was going to be the head of their party, and the head of their party was Adolf Hitler. It was all very constitutional. After that election, and since the Nazis had a very slight majority in the Reichstag, Chancellor Hitler used his totally legal power to have a bunch of opposition representatives declared traitors. Now, these were mainly communists and socialists who'd been elected to represent the people. But because the Nazis controlled the courts, they had these representatives put into concentration camps or killed legally. And since jailing and executing their political opponents was a very successful way for the Nazis to have an overwhelming majority in the legislature, the Reichstag could then approve any law Hitler proposed unanimously. The Nazis then shut down the independent press and began their uncontested and systematic murder of the Jewish, Slavic, and Romani people. Oh, and you know who was the head of the Reichstag at the time? A guy named Hermann Goering. His job was basically like Speaker of the House of Representatives, which means Goering would be like Speaker Mike Johnson, only much bigger. But basically they had the same job, to deliver unquestioning unanimity. Oh, and you know what else? All that time when Hitler was running Germany, after the Nazis had jailed and killed all of their political opponents, they still had elections. Yeah, they did. They just won all of them. So, having elections isn't a sign you don't have a dictator or a wannabe dictator. And having a legislature isn't a sign you don't have a dictatorship or a gonna-be dictatorship. Nope. All you need is a head of state who believes themselves above the law. A head of state who enforces laws that advance their own agenda. A head of state who uses their position to punish political opponents. A head of state who ignores the courts. A head of state who has a legislature that rubber stamps any policy or action they propose. And a head of state who forcefully muzzles any voices of dissent. Dictators hate dissent, because it can lead to stabby stabby. Anyway, that's dictatorship.